Hello and welcome to this joint webinar by IISD and UNDP. We're still being joined by more participants I'm your host today. My name is Iveta Gerasimchuk. I'm Director for the International Strategy with the Energy Program of IISD. It's my absolute pleasure today to be joined by speakers from 5 continents and by you, participants. We had more than 300 registrations from this for this webinar. So it's absolute pleasure that there is so much interest in our topic, which is advancing the transitioning away from fossil fuels and third generation national climate plans, or NDCs, nationally determined contributions. So this is a 1-hour webinar. And we have a lot of material to go through. We have exciting speakers, but we will also try to have space for discussion at the end of the webinar. So right now, if you are joining as an attendee, you're on mute. You should be able to see the Q&As box. You can start already using it if you have prepared questions. We have also arranged for interpretation from Russian into English and the other way around, because we have some participants who are only fluent in Russian. And this webinar is being recorded. We're hoping that those of registrants who were not able to join right now, they will still be able to watch the recording later on the web. So without any further ado, I will probably just say that, of course, we're having this webinar after the negotiations in Bonn at SB 62. Originally, we were trying to organize this webinar before Bonn, but maybe now even there is more clarity about what these negotiations can or cannot achieve in operationalizing the outcome of the global stocktake, and in particular paragraph 28 on transitioning away from fossil fuels. And of course, this is a year of nationally determined contributions. Over 100 of countries are still working on their national climate plans. And that's where countries, irrespective of the negotiations process, can still operationalize a lot of commitments and a lot of specific actions. We have, from different angles, looked at different aspects of this transition. So I will then ask speakers to focus on some of them. And it's my absolute pleasure now to introduce our keynote speaker, Cassie Flynn, who is from the UNDP. And Cassie is Global Director of Climate Change. Cassie, the floor is yours for opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Iveta, and thank you so much to all of the colleagues at IISD, and it's such a pleasure to be here and to be having this conversation. As you said, as we've now concluded the Bonn negotiations, we're looking toward Berlin. It is the moment of NDCs. It's also a moment when we know that global temperature rise is increasing and intensifying. You don't have to look further than the headlines to see what the stakes are. And we know that meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement requires a transformation of the global energy system. We see this, and Iveta, you mentioned that the global stocktake and the paragraphs that talk about tripling renewable energy capacity, doubling energy efficiency gains, and this phrase of transitioning away from fossil fuels. And for many years, this has been the real elephant in the room. I mean, fossil fuels are the ways that we have built economies. It is the way that we have depended on building industry and infrastructure, even the plastics that are used. This all comes down to fossil fuels. And so what does it mean to transition away from something that many economies have been entirely built upon? And doing this in a way that is mindful of a just transition, doing this in a way that is mindful of ensuring that vulnerable people and vulnerable communities are taken into account as we think about this transition. And so we face this real dual challenge. How do we reduce our level of fossil fuels, but also advance well-being, human well-being, to the devastating impacts of this fossil fuel driven growth? And so what does this practically look like? Because again, this has been the elephant in the room. How do we actually do this? How do we talk about a transition away from fossil fuels in a way that takes care of people? And one of the ways is that we need to be really realistic about what it means for countries as it varies across levels of economies. Fossil fuels looks very different in a small island developing state from one of the G20. And we know that it needs to be just, it needs to support sustainable livelihoods and well-being, and protect the most vulnerable. Also, it requires a transformative shift away from the most energy intensive power production sources and sectors, including phasing down fossil fuel power production, reducing emissions from road transport, buildings, waste, industry. And it also means phasing out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies that don't address energy poverty or a just transition. This is so critically important. How do we, because fossil fuels have become a part of this system that we have created. And when we talk about transitioning away, we have to start transitioning the entire system. So this challenge is daunting, but there are some good news. There are some encouraging trends. IEA just said that investments in clean energy are reaching unprecedented levels, outpacing those of fossil fuels, driven rapidly by the falling costs and technological advances in solar and wind and battery storage. Renewable energy deployment is accelerating worldwide, and solar and wind capacity they're breaking records. We're seeing this investment just go through the roof. According to IRENA, 2024 renewable power capacity reached over 4 gigawatts, representing 90% of the total power capacity expansion. Investments in clean energy have reached a record high of 2.2 trillion in 2025. These are really positive trends. And we know that we need to do more. Again, we have to transition the entire system that we have built that depends on fossil fuels. And so actually UNDP, we've been trying to roll up our sleeves in this, and we have, in collaboration with the University of Denver and Octopus Energy, we have created a scenario model where we are trying to envision what a renewable powered energy future would look like, and what it means for people's lives and what it means for communities. And through this research, something that we have seen is that higher ambition on clean energy pays off. In the scenario where we achieve these global stocktake targets, this tripling of renewable energy, this doubling of energy efficiency capacity, the share of renewable energy would grow from about 8% in 2024 to 87% in 2060, and would provide the world with reliable access to clean energy and clean cooking. And compared to a business as usual scenario, 193 million fewer people would live in extreme poverty. Nearly 200 million people. 142 million people fewer would face malnutrition. 550 million more would gain access to clean water and sanitation. These are life-changing access to sanitation, to clean cooking, to energy, all because we've invested in clean energy. The economic benefits would compound these gains, delivering over 20 trillion in cumulative savings by 2060 and increasing per capita income worldwide by $6,000, all while addressing the climate crisis. And this is why this moment is so important to be making these choices, because it is about the environmental impact of fossil fuels, but it's also about what can we do to help people live better lives when we change the systems that depend on these fossil fuels. So now looking ahead, energy is central to all of this, and certainly, at UNDP and we have been working a lot on nationally determined contributions. We've supported now over 90% of developing countries on their NDCs. And there's a few trends here that I find so hopeful, and that, 100% of countries have included energy as a priority sector. This is so critical. We're seeing energy really at the heart of national plans on climate action, as it should be. But we're also starting to see countries really face that elephant in the room. Of the NDCs that have been submitted so far, over 60% have talked about transitioning away from fossil fuels. And around 37% of those have actual quantified targets. This is really remarkable, because even just a few years ago, this would have been the thing that people didn't quite touch, because it's so hard and so difficult and so layered. But now countries are really starting to make these choices and starting to signal that they're taking this transition away from fossil fuels seriously. And it's very complicated. We know it's possible. We know that we can transition away from fossil fuels. We know that we can enable a cleaner, better, more productive society that helps people lead healthy, productive lives. And we can do it all while transitioning away from fossil fuels. It's not just about climate, but it is about people, and it is possible. So I'm very much looking forward to the conversation today, and hearing from colleagues, hearing from the stories from the ground about how countries and communities are making these choices, and really looking forward. That's that, over to you.
Thank you very much, Cassie, for this opening remarks, very much on the inspiring and positive side. So if people have on the floor questions to Cassie, you can use the Q&A box. We can try to fit it in. But as it happening, Cassie, can I ask you to talk a little bit more about Climate Promise 2025? And the process itself, and in particular the support that UNDP can provide to countries who are still working on their NDCs.
Absolutely. We are trying to do everything that we can to help countries to be ambitious when it comes to their climate targets, but also, as we heard a lot about in Bonn, what does this actually look like on the ground? How can you take some of these big global dialogues that we have in these negotiations and actually support the implementation and delivery of these ambitions? And so UNDP, with our flagship initiative called the Climate Promise, we have been supporting now, as I mentioned, over 90% of developing country NDCs. And we've done this in close partnership with about 30 UN entities. The Secretary General actually asked UNDP to be the coordinator across the UN to be able to support this work. And it's everything from developing these NDCs that are coming in the door now, but also working on a whole variety of themes, whether that is humanitarian issues, health, agriculture, climate data, peace and security, all of the ways that we can enhance the ambition of these NDCs, but also the quality. And I think what we're seeing now, I mean, and these challenges of transitioning away from fossil fuels, as I mentioned, over 60% of the NDCs submitted so far talk about this transition. And we know that it is a very daunting task, and it has to be so rooted in the national context. But there are countries that have really started to make moves. And so, Uruguay, for example, 95% of their energy is renewable. That they've made this transition over years and really worked to embed this within their national development planning. Uzbekistan is looking at how they can have things like an innovative carbon resources application for energy transition called iCraft. And this is where they can improve energy efficiency, they can phase out energy subsidies, switch to clean energy sources, and doing it in a way by a pretty advanced policy program. We're seeing countries really start to make these moves. They need to do more. They need to do it faster. We all do, but I do find a lot of hope in that.
Thank you very much, Cassie. There is one question for you from the floor. Whether UNDP is working or has already a scenario for a fully renewable future.
This is where I think this report that I mentioned is really helpful, because and I'm so pleased I'm joined by Lulu, who's on the line here, that this project that we've done with the University of Denver and Octopus Energy really tries to dive into exactly this, about what would it look like to achieve those global stocktake goals for development. And this is where we see this level of investment in clean energy not only helps address, of course, the climate crisis, but also it brings people out of poverty, by the hundreds of millions. It's bringing people out of poverty, helps people act, hospitals, schools, be able to access energy so the students and the patients have what they need. Being able to bring people closer to clean cooking solutions, and being able to address things like malnutrition. The development impacts of achieving some of these clean energy targets and transitioning away from fossil fuels are quite significant. And we need to talk about this more, because when we talk about sort of trade-offs on renewable energy, but I like to think about it as a trade-up, right? That how do you start to make the case, the business case? How do you start to make the development case? Actually, just investing in clean energy is the smart thing to do.
Thank you very much, Cassie. We have one more question for you in the chat, and I know also you wanted maybe to touch base a little bit more on development benefits. We also have to advance the panel, so maybe I'll give you just 2 more minutes.
Oh, yeah.
There is a question in the chat on development finance in particular, and the lack of it, unfortunately. And how do we reconcile these potential benefits for development with the actual lack of finance for it right now?
This is the #1 hurdle, of course, by far, when it comes to implementing targets out of an NDC, that it is finance. And we saw this in Bonn. We have seen this across, of course, out of the negotiations in Baku, is how do we start to change the way that countries can access resources? And this requires a transformation of the global financial system. It is not about small moves, because countries need to be able to access the level of resources. And again, this transition away from fossil fuels is a massive undertaking. It requires changing the entire energy system of a country. And so how do you do that in a way that can help countries to access the type of financing that is needed? And that means really changing how we think about investment, how we think about risk, how we think about the way that these investments need to flow. It means pretty hard conversations on what that looks like. And I know I don't have any time, Iveta, but look, happy to talk about this more, because there's a lot of equity issues within this.
Thank you very much, Cassie, for your time. It's a pity to cut this discussion short, but we do need to move to examples from the ground, as you said. So I would also invite UNDP colleagues who are online to maybe continue this discussion in the Q&A box. You can add answers there. There is one more in the box. Cassie, and I thank you very much for your time and your insights. And we look forward to more developments from the UNDP's climate support to countries and the Climate Promise 2025. Thank you. So we have, as I mentioned, speakers from 5 continents. So we had a slight swap in the order of their presentations. We'll start with Ari Sudijanto, who is from Indonesia, so it's really late Ari's time. And Ari is Deputy of Climate Change and Carbon Pricing Governance from the Ministry of Environment of Indonesia, working on the NDC. And we will ask everyone to speak for 3 minutes. So in Indonesia, of course, we have a unique platform, which is the Just Energy Transition Partnership. So Ari, maybe you can touch a little bit more on what was the connection and the influence of JETP on the NDC that Indonesia is developing right now, and in particular, if there is like any experience you would like to share on the retirement of coal power plants.
Okay, thank you, Yvette. The Indonesia, the government of Indonesia, I think, together with the key stakeholders, including state-owned enterprises, independent power producers, and financiers, and also development partners, played a vital role in shaping effort to achieve our NDC targets. Particularly, like your question is in reducing emission from the power sector through early coal plant retirements. While the Just Energy Transition, or JETP, support this effort. It is important to clarify that the JETP actually is not Indonesian National Energy Transition Policy and is not formally part of NDC. Indonesian Energy Transition Pathway is guided by official national documents such as our National Energy Policy, the National Energy General Plan, and the National Electricity General Plan. These frameworks serve as the official basis for the NDC's energy-related targets. Government Regulation, Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources Regulation number 10, 2025, provides the legal basis and criteria to early retirement of coal-fired power plants, including factors such as a plant age, emission utilization, economic value, financial availability, technology readiness, tariff impact, system reliability, and alignment with just transition principles. Among these, financial availability or financing availability carries the greatest weight, reflecting the significant cost involved in early retirement. The Comprehensive Investment and Policy Plan, the IPP, developed under the JETP, is not an official national policy document, but rather a supporting document that outlines more ambitious energy transition pathways. JETP offers conditional support, with a key focus on accelerating renewable energy penetration in the energy mix rather than making early coal retirement the primary objective. Largely due to its highly cost and complexity, like I mentioned previously. For example, one initiative under this effort is a planned early retirement of the 660 megawatt Cirebon 1 CFPP by 2035 through the energy transition mechanism. However, such projects require careful assessment of technical, financial, and legal feasibility and demand exceptional due to their cost implications. I think I've had.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being on time. Also, if there are questions to Ari and the following speakers, you can still use the Q&A box, and then we're hoping to come back to all the speakers at the end of the webinar. So I know we've been also joined all the way from Colombia by Andres Arevalo from the Directorate of Climate Change and Risk Management of the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development. Can I just check the sound with Andres, and also if you are comfortable speaking in English?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. In Colombia is the morning, so good morning for the people who connect in our zone, our area. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear and we can see you very well, and you will be our next speaker. So, of course, Colombia is very well known for its ambition on transitioning away from fossil fuels and also its membership in the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance, for instance. So maybe, Andres, you can talk about how this is influencing the NDC process for Colombia.
Okay, I start to well, I start to say we are right now working on our NDC, so we are no end this job, but I can tell you the approach of the Colombia government about the transition away from fossil fuel. Because this is the main approach of this government. And first of all, Colombia, to achieve that, Colombia is working on reducing demand in carbon intensive sectors like industry, transport, and energy. The NDC is working in formulate measures in different sectors to about reindustrialization, about economic diversification, the transition of the transport. We are measured with electrification of the transport. We have measured with an economic diversification and to find another sectors another sector like tourism, nature tourism, like strategic minerals, strategy for the transition, um, the diversification of the energy matrix can produce uh, uh, the energy to support the other sector about renewable energy. So we have a big ambition in the diversification of the energy matrix to incorporate new renewable energy like wind, solar, geothermal, and also we are we are making framework with other energy sector like hydrogen low emission. Um, right now, the government of Colombia, we are not delivering new contracts of the oil and gas sector, but we are making we are maintaining the currently production for security energy, but we're working in the incorporation new renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andres. If there are questions to Andres, please use the chat. I'm sure you will get some of them. And now we are moving again to a different continent, to Africa. So we have the pleasure of having Daniel Benefort from Ghana, from the Environment Protection Agency, and Daniel is Senior Programs Officer. So if Daniel, if you can unmute yourself and turn on your camera, I think that would be great to see you.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you. We don't see you yet. If you would like to use your camera, you should be able to see your sign.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Hello?
can. We can.
All right, thank you.
We can hear you. So, Daniel, we have a question for you also regarding the NDC, National
Yes.
Development Contributions that Ghana is developing.
Mhm.
So maybe you can talk more about the targets for reducing emissions in the energy sector as part of your intervention.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks for the opportunity. I wanted to start with a point that was earlier made during the introduction about the NDC process and how it connects with the long-term emission plan, as well as in many cases, the national energy transition plans. The reason is that in many countries, including Ghana, the whole idea of domesticating the three recommendations from the global stocktake on energy is about tripling renewable energy and doubling energy efficiency and transition away from fossil fuel. That vision is translated at the national level through either a national energy transition plan or in the NDCs or in the long-term plan. So the whole idea is how do you connect these three important processes at the national level in communicating the intent to domesticate the idea of either doubling or tripling RE in the same way or moving away from fossil fuel. So that's the first point. And that process is important at the national level. But you have an NDC process that is not independent of the National Energy Transition Plan or framework that at the same time speak to the long-term plan. And that is one area that you are strengthening in the course of this generation of NDCs. Number two is about the fact that the articulation of the vision of moving away from fossil fuel is not only about a switch or a replacement in fossil fuel. And as was said earlier, it is rather, in our view, 3 or 4 areas. How we can, in a just, sensible, cost-effective, orderly manner, engage in that transition. It has to be meaningful for our economy. So that is one very important pillars that we are looking at. How can we engage in this process that is for not only for energy and people or the planet, but how can that process be just and be fair and equitable and at the same time be orderly? Number 2, we are also looking at how we can use that process to also ensure that we support the long-term vision of strengthening the energy efficiency of the country. So it's also an energy security matter. And thirdly, how do we decarbonize the entire energy systems and make it competitive even as we transition? So these are the 3 areas that we look at. And the NDCs, either the NDCs or the long-term plan or the energy transition plans, communicate these intentions. And behind this is to answer your question, what type of measures we are looking at. So we're looking at 3 main measures. And the choices of the measures, as I said, is about how do we ensure that we achieve these 3 areas. So we have been thinking about areas where we can promote transformative energy solutions. So we are looking at how we can sensibly deploy electric mobility in a country that supports the transport transformation agenda in a country, in particular in the urban area. How can we deploy captive energy in industry to support the 24-hour economy policy for the government? How do we ensure that we help build the industry of Ghana by promoting better battery storage in the country? How do we ensure that we are able to take advantage of the benefits of that comes with the carbon removal solutions? We are also exploring the potential for exploring what carbon capture, use, and storage present to us. So we are exploring a couple of tech-based solutions to help ensure the transition. But beyond that, it's also using economic instruments to back it up, because it's not enough to announce these solutions, but it has to be enabled in a way that it can be implemented. So we are also backing up one with economic instrument, carbon pricing instruments, and carbon market interventions to enable that to happen. So that is one side. The other side is the idea of promoting rural economic enclave development. How do you make power available to support rural development? It's also very important for this conversation. And therefore, the role of mini grids is crucial. I mean, because then if you want to bring communities to the grid, it has to be such that the investment environment is ready for it to happen, as well as the regulatory environment happen. So we're also looking at how we can target communities that need support to have access to power in a way that it can facilitate local economic development. That's my answer to your question.
Thank you very much for your intervention, Daniel, and answering the questions. So we now are moving yet to the next speaker, and this is Yedgar Fazaliyev. Yedgar is joining us from Uzbekistan, from Asia. It's also very late, Yedgar's time. He will be speaking in Russian, but we have simultaneous interpretation. You can switch between English and Russian language channels. You need to look either for a globe icon or for 3 dots on the application that you are using. I know we had a slide with the technical instruction for that. I'm not sure how many Russian speakers we may have also who will read this slide. So, but we also have slides from Yedgar in PowerPoint, and I hope my colleagues will be able to share them in the chat. In the meantime, I'm handing over the floor to Едгар. Едгар, я вас прошу начать выступление. У вас 3 минуты.
Dear Yedgar, you have 3 minutes, and I'd like to give the floor to you now. We cannot hear Yedgar. I believe he's muted. Unfortunately, there is no sound. Yedgar, could you kindly switch the microphone on? Dear fellow colleagues, I will brief you on what's being done in Uzbekistan in terms of the transition in a just way. This just transition is reflected in 2 state programs or strategies of national level. That is the Strategy of Development of Uzbekistan 2030, and the other one is the program on green economy, also state level policy. This is a very complex issue which needs really solid arguments in order to be implemented. Uzbekistan is already on the path of implementing this, but firstly we need our data, then our methodology, then the tools, as you rightly said, to regulate this process, and also we need law framework in order legal framework in order to make this transition irreversible and sustainable. In this context, we've been working on finding the right arguments, so gathering the analytical information in order to ensure the basis for the creation of tools needed in this process. The reform of the subsidies, as has rightly been mentioned, that's one of the factors that impedes the effective implementation of this, which doesn't let us implement more state-of-the-art technologies in the area of energy. That's why a complex model has been built with some scenarios taken into account. We analyzed that and figured out what political measures have to be put in place. It was a multidisciplinary process. We reviewed a few scenarios, measuring the existing tendencies. Then we worked on the subsidies. And then the third scenario was moving away from subsidies. And the fourth scenario was on energy efficiency measures together with structural political methods in order to help the government, help the private sector. Right now, we are fighting poverty. We have our own programs in this regard. We're also trying to take care of the environment more. And within this work, we are focusing on energy policy in order to attain the goals that have been decided on in 2015. So decreasing the CO2 emissions by 35%. It's been some years since the reforms have been begun. And I can share with you now that we're already getting ahead of ourselves. And the figures show that if we were to compare the figures for CO2 emissions taken into account the forests and how they capture the CO2. So we believe that we are going to reach the goals that we've set for ourselves ahead of the time. A law on regulating CO2 emissions has been implemented. A program on a transition towards green economy has also been implemented, and then we have clear goals, increasing electricity production by sustainable or renewable methods up to 70% in our overall grid. That is for until 2030. It is an ambitious goal, but we also think it is reasonable. Alternative sources of energy amount up to 17% at the moment, but we believe that it's possible to increase this number up to 50 and above, because there are state programs with state projects with their feasibility studies have been developed. We already know the project's costs, and these projects will be put in place. So I believe that these goals will be attained. Some other mechanisms on this way is implementing measures on green tariffs. I believe many of you are familiar with them. Many producers may now not just use energy, but also sell it. Energy that's been produced using renewable means. Also, some measures that have to do with construction of blocks, the energy that's used by households, by economic agents. We have some communities which already implemented a service. That's a team of people that go door to door and they propose the use of solar energy to help people to start and use that. Well, these are examples, but the most important thing is to understand the people.
I'm very sorry for interrupting you, but it was a very important point that ultimately it's all about people and not just about planning and sectors. So our last speaker is Paul Matthew, who is joining us from Climate Investment Funds. He's climate finance specialist within the energy team. So Paul, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Yvette. Yes, so it's my pleasure to join this discussion today. Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Matthew, and I work with the Climate Investment Funds, or CIF, as mentioned. I work predominantly on the energy side of things. So amongst other programs, I work on the Accelerating Coal Transition Program. So I'll be focusing most of my messages on the energy sector today, given the work we do and the experience we've gained in the sector. So as we heard earlier from other speakers, it seems like 2025 is a make or break moment for energy. And there are signs that we're advancing in the right direction, as Cassie mentioned. But on the other hand, despite these gains, we have huge tests lying ahead in the upcoming years. Specifically in terms of coal, we know that it still generates, almost a third of global CO2 emissions, and it's still the single largest source of man-made emissions worldwide. And when we're speaking about these transition efforts, if we take a look at the assets, the coal assets around the globe, looking at efforts to transition away from coal would mean around $1.3 trillion in coal assets would remain stranded. And the UN Secretary General had also identified coal phase out as a key climate priority. But there is a different angle that we see that could be considered to incentivize broader buy-in from stakeholders, especially from the private sector, where fossil fuel transition is not just an environmental imperative, it can also be a major economic opportunity for this century. And the proof is in the continual and overwhelming demand for support of all types, whether that's financial, technical, or others. And CIF has responded to several of these country needs by creating multiple program windows, which I can delve into a little bit more. So the current round of NDCs represents a critical window that we can't miss. And we see that there are huge amounts of clean energy investments, but then if we take a deeper look into it, the majority of it still seems to be going toward high-income countries. And the investments in emerging economies needs to multiply multiple-fold. Now, to get this right, we have to look at game-changing emissions cuts. So this won't happen with businesses' usual funding models. So we need to utilize public funds precisely to unlock private sector investment. Now, there was a Bloomberg study this year which recommended solutions like de-risking potential tech solutions, providing technical assistance to help improve enabling environments, to help with integrating intermittent energy, and so on. And SIF has helped do this in several countries. We did this in India a decade ago by de-risking the nascent solar PV market. And over the past 17 years, every dollar from our Clean Technology Fund has mobilized $12 from our partners. So our approach is to proceed with country-led investment plans through our programmatic windows. And these processes are deeply consultative to identify case-by-case basis priority actions as well as financing needs. Now, if I talk about the ACT perspective, the Accelerating Coal Transition Program within the SIF, there is a huge multiplier potential for coal. IDB Invest, our partner, had helped Chile monetize early coal plant retirement, and coal utilization in the country dropped from 36% in 2018 to 22% in 2022. And there is a very significant ramp up, right? And this experience fed into the design and implementation of our program. Now, we think about the SIF contribution in relation to emissions reductions and NDCs. We have several programs that address different parts of the overall value chain. We have programs like the Renewable Energy Integration Program. We also have our latest program called the Industry Decarbonization Program that work alongside ACT. So we are looking at enabling innovative approaches to GHG mitigation. We're leveraging the SIF's programmatic approach by helping access very significant levels of concessional resources. These will help de-risk newer or unproven climate-smart investments. It'll help scale up nascent activities and interventions based on regional context. And we also help provide an established business model with major trusted partners to both co-finance and develop interventions on a case-by-case basis. So we're influencing Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions by supporting projects that transition energy production, starting all the way from coal to integrating to renewable sources. And we are positioning these in a way that these are pivotal tools to help countries meet their NDC targets. So we're supporting decarbonization pathways and integration within existing NDCs, and also helping enhance NDC ambition. So essentially, our message is not about asking the world to slow down, but about accelerating its transformation, as several other speakers have mentioned. But let me wrap up here, given the time constraints, but I'm happy to respond to questions separately in case of any follow-ups. Thanks again to IISD and UNDP for this kind invite to participate.
Thank you very much, Paul. You might have noticed we've been moving from maybe bigger picture to countries, and of course, identifying the needs and the challenges slightly more into the finance world with Paul's presentation. And I know we have one more intervention from the floor from the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance. So I know that we have Ana Ramirez online, and I hope that we will be able to unmute Ana for her remarks about what BOGA has been doing, and also in particular the BOGA Fund. So Ana, can we test your sound? And we should be able to see you.
Hi, Iveta, I'm here. I can see myself, so I must be maybe hiding somewhere if you can see me.
Okay, so Ana, as I mentioned, is working with the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance Secretariat, and she in particular is looking after the BOGA Fund, which is supporting transitioning away from fossil fuels in specific countries. Maybe Ana, you can give a 2-minute summary.
Hi, Iveta. Thank you so much. I'll do my best. Well, thanks for having me here. I'm very glad to be here with everyone, and yeah, to get the chance to share what we're doing at the BOGA Alliance, as well as our fund, and specifically the NDC window we recently launched. So just as an intro, BOGA is a coalition of governments working together to support a managed, orderly, and just transition away from oil and gas. And the fund was the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance was launched at Glasgow, and the fund was launched in 2023 at COP28, and it's designed to fill the gap to support oil and gas phase outs in producer countries across the global south. So as you know, and you've all referred to, there's a lot of multilateral technical and financial support to support transitions away from coal and heavy industries, but there's nothing of that magnitude that exists across geographies and institutions to support oil and gas phase out. So that's what we bring to the table and focus on. Our objective is to support governments develop their vision of what a beyond oil and gas economy looks like, and make the plans, analysis, and policies, and draw the investments required to make that happen. We're quite a small fund, and we want to act as a catalyst to inform, to scope out and inform larger scale requests that can support longer term transitions. So we're here to provide fast and flexible technical assistance. At the moment, we have programs that are active and ongoing in 3 countries, in Kenya, Colombia, and Brazil. And we're still developing programs in about a similar number of countries and of other countries, and including in major producer countries. So how are we supporting this next round of NDCs and the discussion? We've made our TA fund available to support governments integrate oil and gas phase out transitions into their NDCs. So in addition to the programs that we have active and ongoing, and because this is an NDC year, we wanted to make the fund as widely available as possible and to raise ambition on paragraph 28 in the NDCs. So in response to this, we announced our collaboration with the NDC partnership at COP29 in Baku, where we launched the NDC window. I'll share in the chat box the launch webinar that was online in March, as well as a follow-up technical webinar that took place in April, if anyone's interested to take a look. And so, yeah, as was already discussed, we note that ambition looks very differently across different countries and regions. And there is a wide range of ambition in terms of reflecting paragraph 28 in the NDCs. So for BOGA member commitments, this looks like halting new licensing rounds and setting Paris-aligned pathways and end dates for existing production. And for other countries, it can simply mean taking the first steps in terms of analyzing transition risks associated with oil and gas production, and undertaking the analysis required to inform just transition plans and policies. And so right now we've seen really good interest from a range of countries, from SIDS to major producers. We're accepting still applications until the end of August in our first round of applications, and we would like to generate a second intake, ideally before we reach the end of August. So we're right on time for the big events in September, like the ACS in Ethiopia and Anga. So I'll share more information on the chat, and thank you very much for having me. Don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Anna. So we have run out of time. I hope this conversation will continue on other channels. I think it's been a very rich conversation, and 1 hour is clearly not enough to cover everything. As a host, I just want to summarize that what we've heard is both complex, but also it's still very active. And what we've heard, especially from country presentations, is that there is not just a theoretical kind of climate-linked process, but very active work on how to align national climate planning with energy planning, with budgeting processes, with energy security concerns, and ultimately with people. So we've heard about finance challenges, and ultimately it's not just about climate negotiations, it's about work on the ground and with multiple stakeholders, not just within the climate community. We will continue those conversations as IISD, as a UNDP. We hope to see more NDCs recognize the practical elements of transitioning away from fossil fuels. And we hope to take these examples as something that negotiators also can put into the new texts. So thank you very much for joining, and we're wishing you a very good rest of your day, wherever you are, and hopefully see you next time. Bye-bye.